Hey, and welcome back to another episode. Are you tired of workplace drama, ego wars, and cultures that reward the loudest in the room instead of the best people in the room? Today we sit down with Mel Blackwell, author of Uncommon Sense: The Fight to Fix Your Workplace Culture in the Wild West of Business. He doesn't offer up platitudes. He delivers battle-tested ways to rebuild trust, crush toxicity, and create teams people actually want to be on. If your office feels like the Wild West, and this conversation in this book is your sheriff. Mel Blackwell is a veteran leadership breakthrough consultant, speaker, and business culture expert with over 35 years of hands on experience leading startups, orchestrating turnarounds, and scaling large organizations, from scrappy new ventures to billion-dollar operations. A former EOS integrator, he's navigated more than 15 mergers and acquisitions across a dozen of industries. This gives him the front row seat to what truly breaks businesses and, more importantly, how to fix them for good. Through his no nonsense, battle tested approach, Mel cuts through the corporate buzzwords and fluff to deliver practical strategies and build high performing teams, strengthen workplace culture, and drive real results. So, Mel, welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you're here and we're able to get this recording session going and to collaborate on this. So, my first question to you is, if we all just heard your incredible bio and your intro, but if you, in your own words, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, so my wife and I live in Mountain Brook, Alabama. We have 4 kids, one left in college, the others graduated. So we've had a wild ride together. We've spent, and she's a partner in all of this. She's a co-sharer of my scars of how to get this experience. But I've spent the last 35 years in the corporate kind of fixer role. Started out in startups, learned a lot through a lot of mistakes. And then as I became more capable, I engaged with more and more complex, difficult fix-ups. And so what I realized, Tim, as I grew, was somebody would say, they would engage me and they would say, "Can you do this?" And I would say, "Yeah." And then when they said, "Well, how will you do it?" My response was usually, "I can do it as fast as I can tell you how I can do it." And so it became a matter of faith. And they're like, "Let's see if this guy can do it." And we would pull it off somehow, some way by building a killer team. But I say all that just to say that the experience that I gained it was unbelievable. And so it was all culture. And so as I got older and started reflecting to write a book, I had to ask myself, what did I do? How did I do it? Is it the best practice, or did I sharpen it along the way? And what I came to the conclusion of is I was impacting culture. That's how I improve businesses. I know you, with your military background, and thank you for serving. You know, I'm like a special operator. I get on the helicopter and I fly and I'm dropped behind enemy lines. And if we don't come back alive, I die with the mission. And so it's a crazy career to do for 35 years, but I've done it. And so I shift now to thought leader, truly as kind of a shepherd, to say, how can I give back? How can I teach people what I did? And how can I do it without having to get back on a helicopter and deploy behind enemy lines?
Nobody really kind of wants to take a look at their own workplace culture and go, man, we're jacked up, right? Everyone kind of outwardly projects like we're amazing. Come in and help us solve our problems. It's something else other than culture. And I like your approach in Uncommon Sense because you come up with these different archetypes. And, I want to dig into one of them right away, which is the shepherd. Can you kind of explain how you came up with that and why you named it the shepherd?
So speaking openly, I don't hide my faith. I also don't wear it on my sleeve in business too much, because you don't want to offend people. You don't want to make them pick, you know, you're like, I'm a Christian, so I don't make them say you have to be a Christian. But the Christian elements of being a Christian will overflow. You don't have to do anything. So the shepherd concept comes from, Jesus himself, right? And then it's trying to tap into leadership and getting people to do the right thing when you're not there. So I would call it right thing, right way. And then I'd go screw up. And so I've always been, I've been vulnerable, and I don't mind people see that I'm vulnerable, but they see I call it fast fix, fast fail. I call it connect the dots leadership. And so all of that goes together, and most of the metaphors, or they call them Melisms, the people that work with me, the Melisms were simple. They were ways that I could communicate. How can I get something complicated across fast and received? So what happens in business, if you're a shepherd and you don't want to insult people to say, "You're my sheep." It's not like that. When you have a good shepherd, you love the shepherd because the shepherd loves you. And The shepherd's tough sometimes, and the shepherd's gentle sometimes. But the shepherd never puts the sheep, his people or her people, or their leadership team that's under them. So there's shepherds, there's sub-shepherds, and there's sub-shepherds. So there's this whole layer. And anybody that manages anybody, they're a shepherd, right? And so this whole group of shepherds, they have to protect their people from bad elements. And that includes elements within the gate and elements outside the gate. The elements inside the gate, we can go into. I'll let you kind of steer this, but that's where a lot of leaders fail. They don't listen to who it is that's impeding the progress of those that, that work under them. It's like, it's the pervert that's out in the manufacturing team that they just don't pay much attention to. And at some point, what happens in a culture, if you're not a really good shepherd, you can't hear your sheep. So they try for a little while, and then they don't too loud because the bad guys will hear it. Right. So these analogies work real well. So when you're sitting with someone going, hey, man, you've let this person pull against you for a long time, and you're strong enough when you're in the room, that person behaves. You leave the room, and everybody else that doesn't have your power, they get abused by this person. So I go through a lot of, and it rattles people. And it's funny. I can tell some stories if you want, but I call the people that are pulling against us in our business a lot of things. So I use an analogy of tug of war. And in a healthy culture, there should be very little tug of war. There's a time to debate. There's a time to get bloody elbowed and say, I don't know if I agree. And we're trying to, but when the play is called, it is yes, sir. And you go. And so you would be smart to have true ups so that you don't ask your team to go the wrong direction just because you have the power. And that's another thing that I do dot to dot. But the end of this first part of this question would be, it's our responsibility as leaders to remove the obstacles. That falls up. And if it's people that are the obstacles, that can be, I call them cobras, I call them rattlesnakes, I call them culture bandits, I call them scorpions. You and I talked about, I call it the scorpion the frog, you call it the scorpion and the turtle. Same story, old Russian fable. But the bottom line is we owe it to our people to use the power that we have to give them a reasonable slope of the business treadmill. And I get engaged, and we can talk about those engagements because I don't go into the Titanic. That's not smart. I go into situations that people have come to the conclusion that this is too hard. Like, we're succeeding, but something's wrong. So it's not a full 5-alarm fire. It's just, I think I smell smoke, right? Slope of the business treadmill is the highest part of the dashboard of the shepherd. How much or the obstacles, the red tapes, the hoops I make people jump through, making them work with people that are on the other side of the road pulling against us. All that does is it increases the self-inflicted slope of the business treadmill. Our job as shepherds is to try. It's never going to be flat because there's outside forces, but the self-inflicted resistance that we put on ourselves, you really want to lower that for your team. So these are the concepts of the shepherd.
You make really good points, and we're, I call them human rights abusers. These are the people in your organization
You're
that when
you're more eloquent than me.
no, I love your analogies and your archetypes.
Okay.
I really do, but I just call them human rights abusers because I'm just very obvious and point blank. These are the people in your organization that are like really good. They're high performers. They get stuff done, but they just trample on everybody else in the organization, and it just makes their life miserable. But to the senior leaders, they're like, "Oh, James and Bob, man, they're awesome. They're like getting stuff done. What are you talking about? I never see an issue." And then you're like,
They
"Well,
manage up. It's happened to me many times. I'm like, I love this person. This person gives me results. Y'all deal with it, toughen up. And that was me younger. And then I got older, and I'm like, no, I have the authority, and I'm not going to spend very much time managing somebody that's obviously on the other side of the road. There should be no other side of the road inside our walls. There are debates at the appropriate time, but when you call a play, run it. And this is one more point, Tim, I'll make. We're not talking about an environment where we call a play and then we meet again in 3 months. All of these things are chronological. They have to be done in a certain order. In my book on common sense, I go through great efforts to try to hand a playbook off and try to show that chronology, so that, because there's certain things if you do before you do something else, it wouldn't work well. I can give examples if you want, but that chronology of meeting every week and making sure that people have a way to voice concerns, and then decisions are made, to-dos are assigned. We get back together next week, and I call that dot to dot. And so as long as they know we will fail fast, fix fast, as long as they know that I might be wrong, but I have to make a decision. And I teach this concept of speed of business, and that there, and you've been in the military, so it's important when a call is when an order is given out there and there's multiple people that are acting together as a unit, you really can't have somebody that doesn't understand it and freezes and like, I don't understand what was just said. So some of this is the unity of the business and the shared language. And once you can kind of practice, but when you hit the theater, you've got to make sure that your entire team is in their right roles, doing the right things, and they communicate well. So that if everybody else is running at the speed of business and you have somebody who isn't, that's a problem that can get us killed. And so, you can work with that person and coach them, but if they're on the other side of the rope, if that's really what they're doing is they're resistors, they're trying to build a resistance, they've got to go. And I have a concept, folks are like, Mel, that's brutal. And I'm like, yeah, it kind of is, but I'm supposed to protect the good guys. I think of this as one person not doing what they're supposed to that hurts the team. The team doesn't have the authority to deal with that. I do. I have to do this thing. And I have a concept of paying people to go away. This is awesome, Tim. I'll be brief. But I've sat in meetings with the board and I'm like, hey, this executive is, and they all go, well, let's give him 6 more months. And I'm like, y'all just sat and told me all the reasons we can't have this person around. And it comes down to this. They don't want to pay him if he or she doesn't work. And I will push back and I'll go, well, let's just pay him to go away. If they're doing harm to the business, why pay them and let them stay because they're doing harm? Costs the same amount of money. 6 months from now, I have to get rid of. Let's just pay them to go. And that has been another good shepherd concept. Don't hurt people, but get them out of the theater if they're not on your side of the road.
No, absolutely. And I really love how you talk about the concept of using the shepherd to make the environment safe, right? Because the
Yes.
environment's got to be safe for the organization. Now, when we make the environment safe, how does that go into supporting the overall vision of the organization versus the subvision of the organization? And you mentioned like I'm gonna pay people to go away, but how does that all kind of tie it together?
It's fascinating. I didn't even know what a subvision was. I just did it for like 20 years until I figured out what I was doing. And the Entrepreneur Operating System, which is a system written by Gino Wickman, is called EOS. It's fantastic. I started using that in 2012, 2013. It's just an amazing operating system. And it focuses on the vision, one vision shared by all. And then it works on a whole system of how small to medium and even large businesses can run their business, a lot of tools. But what I realized is you have a hard time getting it to the ground. And because, this is very logical. I think people are very logical people. They're a lot smarter. Even the janitor that you think isn't, you start being logical with them, they'll teach you something. It's insane. There's a lot of smarts out there in logic. But basically the vision itself resonates really well at the top because we're always talking about it. We're the ones with the steering wheel. But most of the people down in the organization, their favorite radio station is WIFM. What's in it for me? You have to remember that. And they have a sign on their chest that says, make me feel special. And so that's why they work there. And if you don't pay them, they'll quit coming to work, right? So they need their money. They want to be made feel special. And they honestly don't want to have to deal with your jacked up problems you won't get rid. And so I learned that the subvision is simply about the journey. The main vision is about the destination. It's so simple. Everybody goes, well, of course, Mel. I'm like, yeah, I've been out here 35 years. Nobody else has ever really said it like that. And I'm like, so I had to figure out what I was doing. I was like, it is the how journey that most people want to know about because people, I love it when people debate, but I'm not an argumentative person. I don't understand why it's always and never with people because I don't speak always and never. So these are nuanced conversations, but somebody will go, well, which one's more important? Like they're going to get me. And I'm like, they're both the same important. Like what good is a destination without the ability to get there? That's called a pipe dream. And what good is a journey without a destination? That's just a chatty bunch of nomads, right? And so it's putting them both together, but the people in the business, if they resonate with your vision, which is destination, the big why, the Simon Sinek stuff, right? Like where we're going is brilliant. It's awesome. But they go home every night. And the big question is, do these people even know how to get me there? Like they will lose confidence in you, but they'll still believe in the vision, right? And so trying to get that into the shepherd concept, making sure people understand we have to talk about both. Here's where we're going. Here's how we're going to get there. If a lot of senior leadership teams, middle management, they're always talking about the destination. And people are like, I get it. That's where we're going. We're on our way to Mars. We're halfway there. I get it. Right. But it is all of those swerves and obstacles and market issues. It's everything that's hitting you that you've got to figure out, how do we get there? How do we overcome it? And it's a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, quarter-to-quarter, year-to-year journey.
So you bring up this interesting concept because it kind of contradicted a lot of things that I grew up learning. Like Patton's famous quote, don't tell somebody how to do something. Let them have their brilliance and ingenuity, prove you wrong that it can't be done, right? Or that it can be done, but just in a different way. So when we do this how journey, what are we really talking about with getting people to the finish line and getting buy-in and believing that we
Yeah.
can get there?
It's a fantastic question. I love Patton. He's right. So I'm not saying that the how is necessarily passed down in the same the same hierarchy, the same structure as the where we're going and the why. I think the where and the why are really figured out at the top, and you ask people to join your mission. The how is I call it problem worship in the business. It's fascinating. So I walk into a business and everybody's like, "Oh, the mighty problem," and people laugh and they're like, "Oh no, we don't do that." And I'm like, "Come on, let's go to this meeting." Everybody sits and eloquently finds problems, discusses problems. I mean, just brilliant analogies of how bad the problem is, but they don't understand how to solve problems. They're not even sure who's supposed to solve the problem. And so that is one of the major parts of the how journey, is making sure that people understand, look, you are empowered to solve your own problems. If the problem's popping up in your department, then the part of the how journey for the culture is management needs to push those decision making is down as far as they can and give the people everything they need to make those decisions, which could include appropriate sign-offs. So leaders will be like, get this decision made, we need this done, and then it hits our desk for approval, and we dilly around, we don't approve it fast, and they miss their window of opportunity. So all of this goes together, and this is what catches people on fire in the business. We know where we're going, we believe in it, we are really in on the why. Now we'll start to really believe, hey, we might actually be able to pull this off. We know how to do it. And then it becomes everybody does their own job. And that includes a lot of figuring out how. How isn't passed down from the top, like the mission statement. How's figured out at every department from the bottom back up. So this goes down in the culture, bounces, and comes all the way back up with like a lot of momentum. And then there's another concept I have that if you're not wrecking, you're not riding. It's a fascinating story I could tell you, but that you don't want to roll out in a culture that's not healthy, because it's going to be a catastrophe. So that's chronology. But once you get somebody convinced that you can make a decision, and then you have to let them know you can make a mistake. So then we have to define what mistakes look like. No surprises. Don't hoard bad information. That negative things. Don't hoard positive information. Full transparency. Hey, something good happened. Ooh, something bad happened. Get that out there so that we don't get hijacked or stumble over it by accident. But you have to create a culture where people know to take some risks, and it's okay. We got your back. And then if they do something really stupid, you pull them aside and go, dude, I didn't mean to like run the motorcycle off a cliff. But if you do all those things, Tim, then the how journey starts to be taken from you, and department heads and you begin to get the types of solutions pushed up that you're like, I can't believe these guys are coming up with all this cool stuff. So I hope that answers the question, because
No,
it folds. I guarantee you Patton did that. He pushed it, and then he became the one that approved things quickly that they came up with. But what you do have to realize is they've probably come up with stuff early on that's not as good as what you could have, but you have to let them grow. And it's a lot better than stagnating in a problem worship.
yes. And I love the fact that you brought up the point that we have a lot of people who are employed and they do a lot of problem finding, but not a lot of
Yeah,
problem solving. Right. I think some organizations hire more problem finders than problem solvers.
they're smart. Smart people
Absolutely.
are really good at finding problems, and normal people are better at solving them, to be honest.
So how do we shift that culture to be accepting of the risk and to say, hey, it's okay if you find a problem to bring it up and solve it. And if you made a mistake, it's okay to own up to it.
So what I did one time, which I have to look back, I never call myself brilliant, because these aren't brilliant. If you knew how many mistakes I made before I got to the right thing, you'd say I'm stupid. But at the end, you look brilliant when you keep going, keep going, keep trying. Don't give up. Tenacious. I'm a tenacious human being. So try, never give up, and get people to be like that and laugh. Go have a beer and wipe the blood off each other and go, dude, I can't believe we screwed up so bad. But you fast fix, fast fail. I came up with one rule out of desperation. I was working with a bunch of PhD lab scientists, basically. So we're doing environmental testing. They put me in that. I've never been a subject matter expert, always been a generalist, always going in, doing things that they were nuanced. But if it didn't work, things were going to end up badly. They were the most problem worshipping people I've ever seen. And the problems were so complicated. They were all PhD level chemistry. And I'm like, dude, I'd sit through meetings and just want to go jump off a bridge. And so I finally just went home and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to come up with a new rule. You can't bring up a problem unless you attach a solution to it. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you even say, hey, it's hot in here. And it changed the culture in 1 week, that everybody understood finding the problems halfway there, attaching the solution to it. Is you're not finished, but we'll talk now. So I refuse to engage with anybody that was talking about problems. So that's something you can do now. That's tough because if you have culture bandits, people, what did you call them?
And so I call them human rights abusers.
Okay. So that's so much better. Everybody's going to be like, you need to be more like Tim. So human rights abusers, if you find those human rights abusers, you can't roll out stuff like this because they'll sabotage it. They don't want you to succeed. I've never understood it. So they're in the culture to keep it in status quo. Change is like taboo for them. So those guys have to go, sure. But I mean, I think that it's something like that. You call it problem worship because it's somewhat shaming. But be ready, because when you roll this out, you'll mess up, and your own team will be like, Mel, you didn't even bring up a solution yet. I did one more rule that if you're in a meeting for more than 10 minutes and we're not solving problems, you have my permission to leave as the president of the company. Just walk, go back, do your job. And that puts the pressure on the supervisors not to go do the long. I used to go into meetings, Tim, with my personality and tell stories about the weekend. 40 minutes later, we would leave, and everybody's like, wow, what a great meeting. And nothing got done. I was the worst. And then I was taught by people like, no, Mel, you have to have an agenda. I was told in a meeting, you either pump them up or tick them off. They didn't use the word tick. That was pump them up or tick them off. You either make them excited or you irritate them. And I'm like, really? So I've tried everything, but problem worship can be eliminated faster than anything else. But it really does take every leader in the business truly committing to it.
So let's talk about culture bandits a little bit, because we haven't defined it. So how do you define what a culture bandit is?
So I'll tell you, it could be as simple as I went through a merger, and I was the golden child of a young guy, 6 years working for a company. And I was moving the universe of that business south out of Cincinnati, Ohio. Man, I had so much fun. And then we were acquiring, I've been through 15, 16 mergers and acquisitions. So we acquired 5 companies, and then all of a sudden we got acquired. And in that moment, I had to be real careful because I could have been a culture bandit, because the DNA of the buying company rules. If they say we want to merge DNA, which rarely happens, but it does. Usually what happens is they lie about that, and then they completely change everything. And I've been on both sides of that lie. And so I had to really look myself in the mirror and pray about it and go, if I stay here, I have to, everything I'm good at, I could take this brand and copy and paste it anywhere. Now I'm a totally different brand. So it's not always a bad guy. It's just somebody that can't get on board with either the brand, the vision, or the subvision to how we're going to do it. I can agree with everything. You and I can say, hey, we're going to Mars. And then I can disagree with how you're going to do it. And at some point I become a culture bandit. If you're in charge and you say, hey, this is how, you've been a leader. You have to make decisions. It's lonely. Sometimes it sucks. And you want to get a team around you that understands this decision only really has to last a week. If we meet again, we're going to call a play. We're going to run a week. These are the things we're going to do. We'll true it up and we'll zigzag our way there. And so a culture bandit could be as nuanced and innocent as that. Or it can really be a bad guy. Somebody that just decides to dig in on you, doesn't like you. I mean, believe me, I go in as a change agent to a company that's been there for 20 years, and they are comfortably miserable. They're not succeeding. People are burning out, but this culture bandit is thriving in that chaos, right? And when I go in there to try to eliminate dysfunction, they will fight you to the death. And so I've seen it all. I've seen it all the way from, wow, this guy wants to call me out in the street for a gunfight. That's why I call this book about the Wild West of business. Or it's just somebody that sincerely just can't get around the fact that I'm 35 years old and this person's 60, and they just don't want to follow some young kid. But either way, you get on our side of the rope or you have to go, because if you're fighting yourself, you can't deal with the threats outside the wall. And to me, a healthy culture is all about inside the wall. We get everything we can to be functional, brotherly, sisterly. We care about each other. Somebody has kids and we care. Somebody comes back to work, they're not their full self. Their parents die, a spouse dies, a kid dies. I mean, terrible things happen. And we don't just go like, we really care. You can't do that when you're fighting yourself. You can't do that when you've got culture bandits running around. So for people that have, it can look like the business in survival mode, I call it. They're getting results, but it's not sustainable. People are burning out. There's people that aren't healthy. There's divorces. There's alcoholism. The standards are slipping. It's like, man, we're getting results, but it's not as good. We try to expand the core, but our startups aren't working as well. People are burning out. That's more what I'm talking about. The results are there, but they're not healthy. They're not sustainable. So that's a culture issue. And we go in, and the first thing I do, I say, is you have to make your town safe. if you're in charge, if you ever watch The Pale Rider with Clint Eastwood, comes in as the preacher. I mentioned this in Common Sense, and he goes in and everybody's just letting the barons just run all over the place. And I feel like that sometimes. And I get shot, I get arrowed, it's tough. It's tough to go in and care more about making the town safe than the existing ownership. It almost always starts that way for me. And I go in there and I say, okay, let's do this thing. And my wife's like, you're crazy, because in that moment, it is the Wild West. I mean, there will be a showdown, and there will be a cleansing of the culture, or they'll run me off. Right. And so that's what I'm talking about with culture band.
So what do you talk about with people who are saying, well, Mel, you're just trying to enable groupthink?
It is, but it's individual. I mean, I learned this every day for 35 years, and I finally ended up calling it the best pledge. It is everybody being at their best individually. And in my book, I use a concept. I call it selves, like plural self, teams. That's how traction occurs in the business. You have to get it from the top down, but it will grow back up one person at a time. The collective thinking is, I mean, I don't see that as it's a neutral thing. I guess you could be a cult leader and do it. You could be, you could do a communist and do it. But in my world, I'm like, hey, we're trying to be good shepherds. We're trying to get the business to be resoundingly positive. We're trying to go home the best version of ourselves. But you can't go home your best version of yourself unless you showed up the best version of yourself. So I came up with the best pledge. And I came up with the first half of it maybe 25 years ago. The second half of it came in. I didn't even realize I was doing it. But the first half goes like this, Tim. So I say, look, let's do the best work of our careers right here, right now, together. And folks, everybody goes, of course. That's like the job interview. You just say yes anyway. And then it grew, though, to, and hey, there's one more thing. I want you to be the best version of yourself at home, at work, in your community, with your wife, with your kids, your husband, your family. It's not my definition of best. It's yours. Whatever you're best of, you own that. You get to do that. And I even came up with a concept called the U-horse. And I said to people, I'm like, you're the only person that ever walked the planet looking out the skull holes in your eyes and your skull. Nobody else walks around and looks out of your eyes. It's kind of phenomenal, actually. Of the billions of people, you're one of a kind. You've got to work on the U-horse because you don't get to change horses. So the horse is really kind of your soul. And these are deep conversations. Folks go, I can't have these deep conversations. And I get it. But when you're in a situation where you have to turn pretty quick from treachery, and just so your listeners and viewers understand, I did go into distress situations. And when I say distress, like I said, they're not Titanic. They're distressed because the leadership team is like, something's wrong, or they're trying to hand off their legacy to a second generation or third generation. And there's gaps, and they're like, this, my kids just aren't as strong as me, man. I'm gonna need some help. So there's usually something I need some help, and I go in, but it's worse usually than they know because it's their culture. And so the best pledge is probably the most brilliant thing in that book because it really is based on the betterment of almost every good religion on the planet. It's self-betterment over self-service, right? It's trying to be a better person and holding yourself accountable first. It is hard to the leaders, though, because the leaders can set standards and nobody holds them accountable. But with the best pledge, the leader goes first. I call it a pony up culture. You go first, you exemplify it. If you can't live up to the standards of the business, either change them or leave, because we're not gonna lie to the people. And so everybody has the same mirror. And I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, we talked about it a little.
I love the best pledge that you came up with. And I think everyone listening this and watching this should go back and re-listen to what it is. And then they should comment and say, hey, I'm going to live up to the best pledge. Because no matter where you're at, you don't have to be in some big organization. You don't have to be in some Fortune 500 company to take that pledge. You're going to say, you know what? I'm going to be the best version of myself today for my family. And if you don't have a family, just be the best version of yourself for yourself, right? And for your community and for everyone else around you. And I wholeheartedly believe that if everyone tries to be better tomorrow than they are today, the world's just going to be a better place. And that's why I love this pledge. So if you're watching this and listening to this, say, yes, I'm going to do the best pledge. And then let us know how it works out for you. I'm interested in all of you and how you think it's going to work out. Now, with the best pledge, and we talked about doing our best for ourselves, what about those folks that are like, you know what? I'm going to do the best for me, but maybe I have somebody who is probably a scorpion and they're in the organization. How do I latch on to that? And I would love if you could share the scorpion and the frog story with everybody because this kind of ties in together with that.
So I'll tell the scorpion frog story first. It was a very rainy day, and the creek banks were swelling, and it literally whitewater in the creek. And for a frog, that's just a little struggle of a swim. But for a scorpion, they're not going to do well in whitewater. So there was a scorpion in that whitewater that was bobbing up and down, about to drown. And a frog swims by, a young frog. And the scorpion looks over and says, "Oh, Mr. Frog." He's like, water's coming out his nose. He's like, "Please, please, would you give me a ride to yonder bank? It's only 50 feet. And if you will, I'll be forever in your debt." And the frog like backs off even further and goes, "You're a scorpion. Your kind's been killing my kind for centuries. I've been taught. I know better than that." And so the frog begins to swim away, but he kind of looks back, and the scorpion is literally bobbing. And this is what the scorpion says: "Mr. Frog, it is as if you are murdering me yourself. You have the power to save me. Please save me." And the frog says, "Okay." So he goes over there and he gets the scorpion. "I just feel like I need to do this. This is the right thing." And they have a pretty good chat for about 10 feet. And then the most terrifying sting in the middle of the frog's back. And he's like, "Oh my gosh." And he's about to go paralyzed. And he looks back at the scorpion, who's got a little grin on his face. And he says, "Mr. Scorpion, why would you sting me and kill me? Now we're both going to die. This makes no sense." And the scorpion says, "Mr. Frog, I'm a scorpion. It's in my nature." And so it's difficult for people. I think as a good shepherd, people, does the sheep really understand good versus evil? Does the sheep really understand the bad guys? Does the sheep really understand what kind of wolves are out there with banks, with competitors, with, other governments that will let their people steal your intellectual property? Do they really understand it? Probably not. And is it their problem to understand? No, but they do need to be protected from it. And so I don't think you can spend a lot of time trying to teach your people everything that you have to understand to be a shepherd, but you dang sure need to know it if you're a shepherd. And those kinds of people, there are really toxic people that don't, that they will, and they're amazing, aren't they, Tim? They'll behave and they'll do, it doesn't take but just that one eye roll or that one time where you really call a play and they freeze everybody up, because they're either going to say these kinds of things. They don't believe in where we're going. This is not this brand's been here for all these years, and this is not the way that great grandfather so and so would have done it, whatever. Or they'll attack your house journey, and that's why being able to be crystal clear on those two is important, because your people will understand that. Like when we call a play, we run it, but don't worry, we'll adjust if we're off. If these people just don't want to get behind you, you get rid of them. And I don't think it takes a long conversation. I can tell you an interesting story. I don't know if we have time this episode.
We got time. Go ahead.
I was the CEO of a software company, and I went in, and it was tough because they spent millions of dollars and they just weren't getting traction. And I go in, and there was the programmer that had coded all the code, Harvard grad, very very sharp guy, Ivy League. And so he comes into my office one day, and kind of, I call it, picked up the baby and put a gun to his head. And this is a fascinating story. So I was sitting there, and he comes in and he says, "Look, I'm going to go on vacation with my family. I'll be back in a week. And these are my terms." And he laid out a big dollar amount in equity, neither of which I had the authority to do. "And if you don't give it to me, I'm going to take the code and basically won't have a company." And I'm kind of like this all the time. You can come in and tell me the house is burning down. This is what you're going to get. And I was like, wow. I said, "So this is important. Here's how you deal with that." I repeated it back. I said, "Let me get this straight. What your terms are is," and I repeated it back. And he said, "Yes." And I said, "You sure about this?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, enjoy your vacation." When he came back, he walked in the door, and I said, "Get your stuff and get out of here. You're fired." He was stunned. During that week, I had lawyered up. They didn't have a contract with this guy. I mean, honestly, he had all the power and authority to do this. He had us over a barrel. And we lawyered up and we dealt with it. Now, since this time, this guy's very, very, I don't want to hurt him because he was young, and he learned a lesson. I think he's a pretty good guy. But in that moment, he was a culture bandit. He picked up the baby and put a gun to his head. And I came up with the rule that day: when you're the last good guy in the room, when you're the last most powerful good guy in the room, you never put down your gun, ever. Like, it sounds crazy, but when you put down your gun, that guy's got you. So that became a Melism. I'm like, man, did I just learn something? And so those kind of things are overt. Like, that's a culture bandit. But that guy was a culture bandit for a long time. And then he finally showed his true colors, and I dealt with him. But that's a tough thing. And so then everybody, all of the people are like, holy crap, the guy that wrote all our code is gone. And, it's tough. It's tough to be us. But if you want to do it, you have to be a shepherd. You have to be tough. And it worked out. I mean, it was rocky, but it worked out.
That's a great story because I wonder how many other people that are listening to this right now and going, "Man, I probably would have caved and be like, I really need this product. I really need this code." But like, you guys were okay. I mean, I'm pretty sure you figured
Well, I
it
went
out.
to the board and they wanted to cave. And I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm just no way, because you don't pick up the baby and put a gun to its head and get what you want. You just, and it now I figured we could get out of it, but I'll tell you, Tim, this is the most fascinating thing. That guy had been a problem for quite some time. And slowly but surely, once it settled, people would come in and go, We've never known anybody that would do this kind of stuff." When you get rid of the bad guys, everybody else is like, I never thought anybody would ever get rid of these people. The whole play, this has happened time and time again in my career. And they're not, I bump into these people. I like them. They're decent people, but they're on the other side of the road. I don't understand it. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. We're going to die. We're going to die in this argument that we're having. So move on. I'll pay you to go away. Just go on. And I'll try to surround people that want to get on the same. But you do it for the people, and the people really love it. They're like, I never thought anybody would ever address this. Nobody else even sees it now. So, honest to God, Tim, within a week to 2 weeks of joining a business, I have to have the authority. I got real good at negotiating the authority, because once you say yes, you're just an employee, right? So I had to have the authority. I wiped the slate clean with the culture bandits and the scorpions. And folks would just it's disruptive, and everybody's like, "Wow!" So Mel, you don't even understand this ERP software we're doing. I'm like, I know, but we have a safe town. So now I'm going to roll out all the stuff we talked about today, and the people come to life, and they're so capable. And sometimes it just needs you to get, the guy that owns the general store in the movie, with the preacher, the pale rider, they all come to life at the end of the movie, and they're all, seem to be better people. And the preacher just rides off all shot with blood on him like me. And I go on to the next town, and I'm like, okay, I'm done with that. If I come to somebody's town, I'll go to the saloon and have a drink and leave. I don't think I'm going to stay and be the sheriff anymore. But it's been fun. I really love it.
It's really great when you frame it that way, because there are tons of organizations out there where people think, well, I got to hold on to this key talent. I got to hold on to this key thing because they're the linchpin to everything else. And they're making everybody else's life miserable. And we as leaders, we have to think about our people, because one, that gets us to the how journey, right? If we can't say there's this vision and our actions not be congruent with what the vision is, and we've got to make it, you know, available for them to do the work. So I really love that your uncommon sense is more like a blueprint. And so in there, you go from we're operating in survival mode, but we're going to end up in thrive mode. So
Yes.
with that, I kind of want to like leave it with you to how do we get from survival to thrive?
It's these things. It literally is a chronology. If you have to have a safe town, then you have to structure first, people second, which I won't go into today. It rattles people. They're like, "Whoa, you think structure is more important than people?" No, I think you have to get the structure right so that the people can be the most important thing. People put in the wrong structures, janked up treadmill. So that I learned in graduate school. So you really do want to do that kind of thing. You want to go. You last thing you want to do is get to a scorpion and say, "Hey, I see you have a sign on your chest that says make me feel special." So you can't roll this stuff out with scorpions. You can't roll out wrecking and riding with people that can't solve problems. It'll be a catastrophe. So there's a chronology to it, but it's make the town safe. Let's focus on problem worship. Let's get rid of that. Let's make sure people know, hey, you're here to solve problems. I'm going to help you. It's okay to make mistakes. You have to get the how journey going. It's all these different things. And then you do have to have some sound practices, how you operate, how you run the business, how you meet, how you escalate, and how you meet to plan, and how you pivot and change and have fun. In the environments that I go into, there's not a lot of laughter. There's a lot of whispering. And you walk into the room and it changes. And then when you do all these things, it's scary. By nature, people are comfortably miserable, and you have to overcome that as a shepherd. So you can't beat them across the bridge. You have to lead them. You have to make sure they understand it, but you do have a time window. So if you have some sheep that just don't listen, then you have to consider that, because we want one unified vision and one very effective shared language. That's the Tower of Babel. And in the Bible, it's talked about like, oh wow, God literally said, look at them. They're so united in their purpose, and they have such a shared language that there's nothing that they set their minds to that they cannot do. I wonder if I can use that in business. I'm like, it works. It's superpower. So that's what you're trying to do with all of this. See, most people are pretty good at the top, but we need one unified vision. It's like, okay, the shared language is the how journey. It's getting people to understand how we're going to do it. It's being able to use fast moving math, more like AI can be helpful, but it's coming. So we might as well learn how to use it. But it can be a part of a shared language. But what we want to do is unify where we're going, and we want to unify how we talk, how we communicate, and at the speed of business, remove those obstacles, and then the best plays. The best plays is amazing because you see their spouses at the Christmas party, and they're like, I love it that my wife or my husband works here. And that to me is like, that's worth more than the money, because you can say, well, good, because they're like, it changed when you got here, man. I just look about 100 years older. I've got arrows in my neck, and I'm like, well, thanks, man. I'm glad it's better, But I realized it was duplicatable, repeatable. It is a blueprint. Thank you for saying that, Tim. And it's something that you don't have to be a smooth talker to make this stuff work. You just have to care, and you have to get the best out of people. The last thing I'll say is that what I said to myself one day, I was like, I can't get the best out of these people because they're being their worst. And then I thought about that and kind of woke up in the middle of the night. I was like, you can't it's illogical to expect people being their worst self to give you best practice at business. And I was like, okay, that's got to go into the book. And I wrote that down 10 or 15 years ago.
So, Mel, my last question is there anything that we didn't talk about that you're like, Tim, you didn't ask this question, and I really have a burning desire to talk about it?
The only thing I'll say is, along with all of this, is a strong charge for mediocrity is just not good enough. It's not good enough. It's a cop out. And so if all somebody does is be the old hard butt daddy, it's like, that's not what we're talking about. But I set really high goals. And I go pretty fast in these things that we're talking about. And what you realize is that people, they're comfortably miserable. And like I said, you have to lead them out. So comfortably miserable simply means that you're more comfortable in that state of misery, and you'll choose it instead of the discomfort of change. So the devil, and that's almost everybody. It's us. You can push. You and I could get pushed. We could find the button where we're comfortably miserable and be like, I don't know. But in business, you got to get everybody across that bridge. I think setting high standards is a big part. This is the last thing I'll say. I went into a business that wasn't hitting goals. It just drives me crazy. I'm like, it's a choice, y'all. And you're not hitting goals. Maybe it's 175 obstacles for me and just effort for you. But we've got to figure this out. I've got to remove red tape. And I made this one statement. You start doing your job at goal, at 100% goal. And I created a visual, it's in the book, where you have a runner that shows him starting at 0 and finishing at 100%. And then you have another visual of a guy that starts at 100% and he's running towards a bucket of gold. These kind of things, that's the shared language. The right people in your culture that understand the how journey is going to be. Hey, we have to be at our best. But all you can do is all you can do, and all you can do is enough. We're not going to beat people, into our version of the best, but high standards, and make sure people know you don't start, dude. Somebody goes, hey, Mel, you'd be proud I did 88% of my goal last month. And I'm very nice. I just go, well, good, you did 88% of your job. And I just leave it like that. And they'll circle back around and go, hey, is that not good enough? No, you start doing your job at 100%. And so these kinds of things, there's a lot of love and kindness. There's that shepherd, there's that part of, we've got to get to this space by dark or we're going to die type stuff. And it's tough. It's tough to be a leader. But there's a whole section in my book, Uncommon Sense, that talks about, are you cut out to be a leader in the Wild West of business? And all I would ask is this, Tim. Please buy Uncommon Sense and give me a good review if you like it. And if you do, share it with other people, because I actually think it could help a lot of people in small to medium to large businesses, nonprofits, churches. I think anybody that's in a leadership role, I think could really benefit from it. And that's why I wrote it.
Absolutely. I have the book. I'm almost halfway through it. I told you I'd read it, so I'm actually reading it. I'll get through it by the end of the weekend. But it's a real good blueprint for everybody out there that if you're like in a business and you're like, it's kind of chaotic, what's really going on here? Take a look at it. You're going to find a lot of the archetypes. You're going to recognize them immediately, because you're going to be like, as I was reading it, I put names to like different characters and archetypes. I'm not going to name them here, but I was like, oh yeah, well, this is this person. This is this person. Like, oh yeah. So you're going to see that blueprint and you're going to see it unfold, and then you're going to see a way forward. So I kind of want to end with this in mind. Mel, you mentioned the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. And if you're in an organization, you're willing to put up with the devil you know versus the devil you don't know, take a look at Uncommon Sense, take a look at this and go, you know what? Maybe we need to make sure that we secure the town, to make sure that we have the right structure in place, get rid of the problem worship, as you mentioned it, and get forward in achieving our goals and getting the best version of ourselves and the best work that we can. So Mel, in the descriptions of this episode, I'm going to put all your links, the link to your book and everything so people can get a hold of you and all the wonderful things that you bring to it. So that way they can reach out and pick your brain as well. So, Mel, I really appreciate you being here and being on the show.